Imagine an ominous clock, its hands spinning with an urgency that sends a chill down your spine. This is no ordinary timekeeper. It's the U.S. debt clock, a relentless, remorseless machine where every tick represents billions of dollars added to the towering mountain of national debt. Observing the mesmerizing ascent of figures on the U.S. debt clock every passing second induces a sense of vertigo. These numbers possess a singular trajectory, upwards. They accumulate with such velocity that they breach an additional trillion mark almost effortlessly. As the hands whirl, the numbers rise, and the sense of foreboding deepens. The United States federal government debt crossed the staggering threshold of $30 trillion for the first time in history in February 2022. By December 2023, the debt had soared to $33.1 trillion. Merely 3 months into 2024, and an additional $1.4 trillion have piled on. If this exponential trend persists, it's conceivable that the debt could touch $40 trillion by year's end. The colossal amounts dedicated to endless wars, exemplified by the over $8 trillion spent on the open-ended war on terror, alongside ongoing billions funneled into conflicts such as the Ukraine war and the Israel-Palestine atrocious conflict, highlight an unquenchable thirst for military involvement, serving to fuel the military-industrial complex. Even in the face of staggering expenses incurred thus far, advocates for military engagement within the deep state continue to clamor for further conflicts, all funded through borrowing. The insatiable hunger for warfare, fueled by borrowed resources, prompts deep ethical and economic apprehensions. The unbridled proliferation of military involvements, financed through debt, perpetuates a vicious cycle of conflict and insecurity, all the while imposing formidable financial burdens on generations to come. It is deceitful, fraudulent, wicked, and morally reprehensible to burden future generations with an $8 trillion debt, incurred from a war on terror built upon false premises and outright lies. The warmongers on borrowed money exhibits a profound moral bankruptcy and repugnant behavior, posing a threat to the fundamental fabric of the nation. In this pursuit of power and control, the well-being of populations affected by violence is sidelined, ultimately undermining the long-term financial stability of their nations. While the debt grows, the fiscal deficit for 2024 stands at $1.6 trillion and is projected to climb to $1.8 trillion in 2025. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, bloated to nearly $9 trillion, teeters precariously despite attempts at quantitative tightening. In a bid to combat inflation's eroding effect on the dollar's purchasing power, the Federal Reserve's seemingly straightforward solution is to raise interest rates. A simple solution, one might think, but the devil, as always, lies in the details. For years, the Federal Reserve has clung to a 2% inflation target as a fundamental pillar of its monetary policy. Yet, the calculation of this 2% is riddled with allegations of manipulation. Critics argue that the Federal Reserve cherry-picks data to align with its objectives, rather than portraying an accurate picture of inflationary pressures. This perceived manipulation has led to a crisis of confidence, especially when reflecting on the Federal Reserve's missteps during the 2008 financial crisis. The Federal Reserve's policy begins to resemble a high-stakes guessing game, with global repercussions that ripple through economies and touch individuals worldwide. Central banks advocate for a 2% inflation rate, portraying it as a modest level conducive to a robust and expanding economy. However, why specifically 2%? Why not 3% or 5%? Aren't they modest enough? It's crucial to recognize that, similar to complex metrics like GDP, inflation faces the curse of dimensionality. Consequently, the notion of a 2% inflation target might lack concrete meaning. This 2% inflation guessing game presents a stark choice: defend the dollar by raising interest rates and risk a financial system collapse, or protect the financial system through quantitative easing and zero to negative interest rates, inviting rampant inflation and potential hyperinflation. Years of near-zero interest rates have inflated bubbles, shifting the economic model from one based on real productivity to one dependent on the fleeting high of monetary stimulus. Central banks and commercial banks have perpetuated this cycle, ensnaring the economy in the allure of financial stimulus. The modern banking system operates on a foundation of illusion, conjuring money out of thin air without actual reserves. Whether it's central banks creating money to purchase treasuries or commercial banks issuing mortgages and car loans, These fabricated numbers are surreptitiously tethered to tangible assets, such as tax revenue or physical property. Such a system is unsustainable because it runs on empty by relying on an ever-depleting purchasing power of the dollar. This deceptive system has distorted the balance between the real economy and the financial sector. The United States has transitioned from a manufacturing-driven economy to one primarily centered around finance. Manufacturing and other industries have been outsourced to countries with cheaper labor, while the U.S. has emphasized services, finance, and related sectors. This enabled the United States to amass significant quantities of dollars through financial practices such as securitization and derivatives trading, which were independent of tangible goods and exports. The shift towards financialization has resulted in various repercussions, including heightened income inequality, the proliferation of speculative bubbles and financial instability, and a deterioration in the nation's industrial foundation. In conclusion, the U.S. debt situation is grave. The relentless ticking of the debt clock is a stark reminder of the economic challenges that lie ahead. The Federal Reserve's policies, the ballooning national debt, and the specter of inflation present a daunting trifecta that could reshape the global economic landscape. The road ahead is shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing remains clear: we are bound to reach our destination. Whether the Federal Reserve opts to safeguard the dollar or protect the financial system, the landing will be harsh. The Fed finds itself trapped in a deadlock, facing a dilemma with no soft way out.